Hello everyone, and welcome to this course on business design. Business design is all about how you understand a business, how you model it, and then how you adapt it using various techniques to innovate. So what we're going to do in this course is simply walk you through initially what you'll learn. First of all, what we're going to do is use the well-established core model, canvas model, called Business Model Canvas, and we're going to walk you through in a step-by-step way exactly how to understand it, be able to understand each of the 9 blocks and be able to then apply them. Secondly, what we'll be able to do then is understand how to create new business models based on your understanding of a business. So whether it's an established business or a new business, what you'll be able to do is use a business model canvas to be able to model new ways and new ways of thinking about it, and hopefully be able to develop something that is effectively going to compete in a marketplace. Thirdly, what we're going to look at is how to use business model patterns. Now, across different industries, there are already established patterns and ways of working that quite often have disrupted markets, companies like Uber, Airbnb, and not all of these might apply to you, but there are different patterns in the way that they've built a business that can be then applied and used in how you design your own business. And some of these can be used to scale a business, to get more customers more effectively. And what we're looking at with patterns is they can easy ways in which you can apply different sections and patterns to your own business model. The other thing we're going to look at is how to and what factors are really important in terms of the business model and how they can be leveraged to create a competitive advantage. Now, what is a competitive advantage? It means that you don't only compete in the short term, but you compete in the long term, and it gives you advantage over others. In other words, other competitors will find it really hard to develop the same capabilities as you. That means that you're not only developing a successful business model, but one that's going to really compete in the marketplace, and others will find it hard to challenge that. Fifth, we're going to look at how to harness marketing and sales tactics to compete more effectively, but we're going to do that through the perspective of the business model canvas. So in other words, how can you change relationships, channels, sales, marketing tactics that really help you get more customers, keep them, and help you grow your business. Talking of growth, the next thing that we're going to look at is what are the things that enable companies to grow fast, scale quickly. One of the things we want to be able to do when we get a business and we've got something that's working successfully is we need to think about what parts of the business and work and how they can actually be adapted and changed so that we can quickly grow our business. And we'll be taking a much deeper look into that later on in this course. Last of all, as we all know, digital nowadays plays a key part in how we innovate. And we only have to look at platform models such as Amazon, Airbnb, lots of different examples I'll take you through in this course. And of course, digital is increasingly about data, how we use it, combining different sides of the market. So we'll take a look at that, and we'll also give you a really good understanding of what digital is and how it affects the design of a business model. So one of the things I've done in this course is I've put together lots of different examples, so it's not just an academic or theory-based perspective. What we'll look at is some of the leading business models in a number of different markets. So everything from Microsoft and how they've adapted and over the years to compete more effectively, to more interesting cases like Cirque du Soleil, Airbnb, Twitch, lots of different examples that you can look at throughout this course to understand how business models can be applied. First of all, we're going to take a look at Module 1. Now, Module 1 is really focused on the business model canvas. So the business model canvas was created by a guy called Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Pigneur. They've got a book called the Business Model Canvas or Business Model Innovation Book. They've also produced a lot of other books that follow on from that in terms of the Invincible company, for instance, which contains a lot more information, but we're going to start off with the basics. And in this module, we're going to take you through a step-by-step approach to designing a business model. And we're going to use the business model canvas to do that. And I've got lots of examples in there, so no need to worry about taking it all on board that quickly. It's a very step-by-step process, and I'm going to give you an easy-to-follow sequence of how you can develop your own business model. Some of the focus topics that I'll cover, and some of the most important parts of the business model, of course, is how you create value for your customers. In any marketplace, what we're trying to do is ensure that whatever we create as a product or service meets the needs of our customers, and the central part of that within the canvas is the value proposition. We'll also take a look at what is feasible, desirable and viable, and in simple terms that means feasible, can we do it? Desirable, will customers want it? And is it viable? Does it make enough money? And as we go through this, we'll be generating a business model. So we'll look at different ways in which you can create and generate a business model following a sequence. The other thing that's really important when you do business modeling is to generate more than one business model. And the way to do that is to then think about not only how many you do, but how you evaluate your business models going forward. So if you've generated, say, 4 or 5, which is a good thing to do, then what we want to do after that is say, okay, how and which ones are the strongest? How do we actually assess that? So I'll be taking through a structure to actually assess some of your business models. First of all, let's just talk about innovation. What are we trying to achieve here? One of the most important things is that we want to create a new product or service or a new value proposition in the marketplace. So quite simply, innovation is about creating new products, often new processes, or even services. And a lot of business nowadays are more service orientated and even on the back of products. So for instance, if you take things like Fitbit is a product. It sells a number of watches that help you monitor and track your fitness, but it also has services on the back of that. In other words, the app allows you to customize how you think about your fitness, gives you feedback on your fitness levels and all those things. That's basically a service on top of a product. And what's interesting these days is how you can use data and different analytics to give customers specific information that is useful to them. And we'll cover that more in detail in the digital section later on. Module 1 is all about the basics. Okay, so what is a business model? A business model is a framework to understand, design and test your business idea. And the most important thing, it provides a systematic way of doing it. When I mean systematic, that means you can follow it as a process, and it gives you a very clear way of understanding how a business works. Now, a business is made up of lots of parts, so I'm going to talk about it in a number of different ways to help you think about a business and how you can design one. First of all, we have this idea of a value proposition. Now, a value proposition is basically what we offer to customers, what we create and customers then are willing to buy. The willing to buy part is really important because although a lot of products are created and even services are created in the marketplace, what often happens is still an unwillingness to buy them. And when you look at all the statistics about startups, there's still, even today, a very high rate of failure for startups, something like 95%. That means only 5% of startups actually manage to gain traction in the market. Now there's lots of different reasons why that happens, but one of the most important ones is they've created a product or service that either the customers don't feel as though they want, or it's priced at an extent that it doesn't make profit, or they can't get it at the right price point. So it's really important to understand how we build a business to successfully create a value proposition that customers want. The second part is all about resources. What do we need to do to create our product? Do we need a factory? For instance, if we're manufacturing, Do we need highly talented and skilled people if we're in a service business? Of course, there's other things that come into play. Just to get a business off the ground, we need some money to hire people, recruit people, pay for the office, lots of different things. And of course, once we've got costs, we then need to have revenue to offset those costs. And that's where we come to think about a profit formula. So in other words, can we make enough money on what we do? Can we turn the revenue versus the costs and make some excess, which we call profits? And of course, the other thing is, what's the activities that we do? What are the process that we need to follow? How do we set a set of processes in place to create that? So if you think about manufacturing, that's like taking raw materials, converting them into products that then go through the manufacturing process. If it's service, it's quite often the knowledge within people and how they actually apply it then in a processed way and an organised way to deliver a good outcome for a customer. So that's just one way of looking at a business model as an overview. Just to give you a very simple idea, if you think that a business is complicated, you're right, it is. But one of the things that we can do is start to think about it in a more simplistic way. The business model canvas helps us do that. Now, I've made a comparison here to the human body. A business model, or a business generally, contains lots of different areas and functions and departments. You might have human resources, finance, marketing, sales, business development. You've obviously got within an architecture business, you've got architects with very highly skilled knowledge. And what we're trying to do is put all those pieces together so they work in harmony and actually deliver successfully to the customer a product or service. Now, if you think about the human body, there's equally lots of different parts that have to work as a system. And so you can think of a business almost like the human body. If we understand how each of the parts work, the organs, and we can think about how they interact with each other, then we can focus on how we can actually diagnose problems within a business. So the way to think about a business model is it's just like a human body. It's got lots of different parts. The better we understand each of those, the more capable we are of designing and helping people. So the business model canvas contains 9 blocks. And it's got lots of different ways in which you can adapt those blocks to innovate. And what Osterwalder did was he took a key look at a business and said, well, although it's got lots of parts, there's some really essential things that we can box together to understand how we can design a business. And the first part really is to understand customers. So one of the things we want to do is how and who are we going to target? We then look at relationships. So what sort of relationship do we want to have with a customer, and can we actually afford to deliver that level of service to a customer? And we'll take a much deeper dive into that. How do we reach our customers? Through channels. And channels are really about how we sell a product, so how we communicate that to a customer, but also how we distribute that product or service. As I said, the value proposition is central to everything. So in other words, that's the product or service we create. We've got activities. What do we do? What are we doing on a daily basis? What do our people do? What's the processes? What are the tools that we need? How do we organize those into a set of activities that create value? Resources are all about what do we need essentially to deliver the value proposition. So resources can be everything from as basic as money, but it also can be things like intellectual property. What are the key things that we have maybe that are unique to us, or what are the underlying things that we need to be able to produce value? And of course, in today's business, we can't do everything ourselves. So one of the things we need to do is understand who do we need to partner with? Who are maybe our suppliers, but also who are going to be there to help us produce things and do activities for us that we can't do ourselves. So we'll take a much deeper look into what partners are, how we can use them, and of course, as we look at a business, we have two parts to it. We have a cost structure, what are the costs within the business, and then we have how do we generate money. And more importantly, when we look at that lower section and think about revenue and costs, that means how do we make money. So walking you through, there's really a quick way of thinking about this. Can we meet customer needs? Can we offer something that they want to buy? Can we generate a profitable business from the sales we make? Can we actually develop a competitive advantage that can be others will find hard to replicate? In other words, that gives us a strategic advantage versus our competitors. And can we actually grow the business? Because in any business, what we want to do is not just stand still. We want to actually grow and develop our business, scale it, get more customers, maybe expand internationally. So those are some of the key things to think about as you go through this course. Now, how do and why should we focus on business model innovation versus maybe an idea we have for a product or service? A lot of research has been done by this, particularly around how effective is business model innovation versus a product or service. One way to look at this is to look at products, or think of a product and then go onto Amazon and see how many different variations of that product are. And you'll quickly find that things nowadays, because manufacturing is easy to set up, it can be outsourced, that there are enormous numbers of competitors at a product level. Unless you've got some very unique material or very unique intellectual property around a product, a lot of products can be easily replicated. The same is true of services. So if you take advertising, for instance, there are loads of advertising companies. So what makes one advertising company more unique than another? And one of the reasons that some advertising companies can be more competitive is because they fundamentally organize their business in a different way to their competitors. Or maybe they offer a niche market, and I'll talk you through that in a bit more detail. But the essence of this is that organizing your business, modeling it differently, innovating versus your competitors, how you organize things, how you structure your business, who you actually target as customers, is far more effective longer term than just producing and focusing on a product or service. So business models have a far greater potential to disrupt markets, and that's what we've seen with huge giants like Uber, Airbnb, and even Amazon. Over the years, that's become a multi-billion-dollar business. And there are lots more examples that I'll take you through as we go through this course. If we look at the business model canvas, we can focus on a number of different parts. First of all, the left side of the canvas is all about creating our product or service. So all those things that we put together, the activities, the resources, the partners, they're all the things we need to produce something. And on the right side of the canvas, we have the focus which is on our customers, and it's called deliver value. So in other words, those are the parts that how we take our product or service to market. Who are we going to target? How do we communicate that? How do we promote that? What sort of relationship do we have with our customers? So the right side of the canvas is all about the customer, the channels, the communications, all those parts. And a lot of people focus really heavily on creating a product or service, but equally you can innovate on the delivery side, how you can change the relationship with customers, who you target, and we'll focus heavily on that later on in the course. Of course, the capture part is we have to get money. We have to get money to compete. And how do we do that? How do we organize our revenue streams? What sort of pricing model do we need? What sort of cost structure do we need? How can we put those things together to maximize our profits? So in this course, what you'll learn is all three aspects of how to create, deliver, and capture value. So how many business models are in the market? There are, well, close to 100 these days. I've put in here 80, and I've put in here that the fact there is 80 business models. And business model can be organized in different ways. But there are some classic ways in which there are existing ways businesses make money. And you can take a look at those in greater detail, and we'll cover patterns in a lot more detail going forward. Just to say though that there are some markets that rely on heavily on some of these business model patterns, but obviously they can be used and adapted depending on what type of business you're designing. So let's just take a quick look. How did Uber change the market? Well, one of the things was that we had an established way of getting around a city, for instance. We ordered a taxi, that was okay, so we had to find a number, we had to call a number, we had to wait for the taxi to arrive, and then it took us to our destination and we paid cash. Those were kind of like the critical steps in using a taxi. So what did Uber do differently? Well, it did a lot differently. By which time Uber came onto the market, people already had smartphones, and that's a key thing here. So they looked at it from a perspective of how can we make this digital? How can we make this simpler for our customers? And one of the things Uber did was think about, well, where are the pains? What's painful in that process? Well, first of all, you've got this idea of finding a number. You know, if you've got a mobile phone, you might have to suddenly look up a number if you haven't got it one stored. You don't think about, well, you know, even if I call them, are they available? So that information isn't readily available. They might tell you it might be a 20-minute wait or whatever. You've got to call the number and get the conversation going. You're not sure quite often when that taxi will arrive, if it's going to be on time, so on and so forth. And Uber changed that. It used a platform to basically cut out some of the steps, like call the number. It gave you high visibility of information, so you can see, for instance, how long a ride is, where it is, how close it is to you as it gets near. And in terms of payment, the payment's on the app, so you didn't need to carry cash. And so there are a number of different ways it changed the process. It reduced the number of steps. Sales happened through the app. Partners. Uber uses a lot of legal companies to help them because the legislation around this is complex. But more importantly, it doesn't need to have permanent employees anymore. In other words, what it has is a number of people that can take people from A to B that are freelance. And so those people make money, and at the same time Uber takes a margin. The other thing that's very clever that Uber did was it changed its pricing based on the demand for rides. So in other words, the higher the demand for rides, the higher the charge, which meant they make more money. So they were able to include different pricing models that enabled them to get lots of different revenue streams. In terms of customer segments, there were people that started taking rides that hadn't really thought about taxis or didn't use taxis much. And so they created new customer segments. The other thing that they did was, in terms of their value proposition, was they made it super simple, very easy to use, intuitive, and very affordable. So they changed the market considerably. And if we take a look at the Uber business model, we can see each of these things and how they are applied into the business model canvas. So let's walk from right to left. First of all, who are their customer segments? Well, their customer segments are very different. They are people like tourists, businesses or people that work for businesses, and even city dwellers. In other words, why do I need to own a car anymore? If I can't park easily, the cost of the time it takes to get from A to B, I don't use it very often, then why do I need to buy an expensive car? Why don't I just use Uber on a frequent basis? And of course, one of their other customers is the drivers themselves. In other words, the drivers, if they don't have enough drivers, they wouldn't get enough passengers. It's like a chicken and egg situation. So one of the key aspects of their business model is making sure that they recruit and retain as many drivers as possible, not just passengers. How do they actually manage those customer relationships? Well, they don't really have and can't afford to have a lot of support for people. Of course, they want to have good customer service, but by making the app very easy to use, very easy to understand, you don't really need to contact them on a regular basis. And even when you do, you've got things like, frequently asked questions, lots of easy to find information. So they've reduced the cost needed to actually manage customer relationships. So it's more like self-support. Of course, if there are issues, they've got feedback mechanisms so they can rate drivers, and they've got emergency calls and things like that. Of course, they're also focused on the safety of customers. In terms of their channels and how they market themselves, the mobile app is clearly one of the most important parts of that, but they also use things like social media, online advertising, and even offline advertising such as billboards and other things. In terms of the value proposition, they really, what's the value of Uber? Well, it's people who don't own a car, it makes it more affordable, people who need a quick ride, and people who are looking for convenience and premium rides. So in other words, you've got Uber has introduced new ways of transportation, not just a simple car, but they've also allowed drivers who have got things like limousines. In terms of activities, what do they do? What do they do to get their business? What's absolutely central to growing their business and maintaining it? Well, first of all, you've got sales and marketing. And they will spend a huge amount of money each year because for two reasons. One is that they always want to grow their business. Some passengers use Uber but maybe drop off and stop using them, buy a car, move houses into a more urban area. And so, since Uber heavily focuses on cities, then there is some churn in the customer base. So they've always got to think about how they maintain a level of passengers, but not only maintain it, but grow versus competitors. And there are quite a few competitors for Uber in the market these days. So sales and marketing, how they position their brand and gain new customers and drivers is really critical. Of course, this all operates on a platform. So there is a digital platform that's absolutely central to all of this, that drives the app, works the app, allows it all to happen. And that is a lot of IT, it's a lot of IT development, and obviously if you think about the fact that they have to work in different languages across the world, there are also all aspects of that have to be covered by the platform. Of course, they also want to support their customers, make sure they're safe, answer the questions, and not least of which is there's been a lot of legal wrangling around how they operate versus taxis. The taxi industry really fought hard to stop Uber going into many countries. And so Uber had to politically lobby governments, cities, and that costs money. So they've had to use companies that strategically look to make sure that they are seen favourably, that they get access, that they don't get pushed out. And in terms of key resources, well, they need IT and development skills. Increasingly, they're using AI and machine learning and analytics, so they understand which customers are the most frequent, how often they take rides, as I mentioned before, how to price differently according to different times of the year, different demands. They've got their marketing, so in other words, how they actually marketing the platform itself, and They've got the network of drivers and riders as well as their brand. So those are their key resources. And the brand is not to be underestimated. So in other words, we all know about the brand Uber. That's an asset. That's a key resource. In terms of partners, they've got technology partners. Uber doesn't do all this itself. So in other words, it uses platforms and infrastructures that are already in place. It's got investors and venture capitalists who have invested heavily in the growth of Uber, and obviously regulators as well, coming back to the lobbying. So they have to have and understand legal aspects and what regulators are changing in terms of law. So the cost structure then is all those other things. It's employees, driver payments, offices, R&D, platform, marketing, legal. So they've got a lot of costs in there. And in terms of then how they make their money, they've got things like commissions per ride, surge pricing, premium pricing for different types of rides, cancellation fees and advertising. Okay, so that gives you an idea of a total business model canvas, and that one's just focused on Uber. So there's a lot of pieces to it, but you can already see that it gives you a really structured way of understanding how a business works. Okay,